So first let me introduce you our panelists today. So I will facilitate this session. My name is Noblecourt. I think quite a lot of you know me already. I'm both admin manager and also the project manager for the missing maps activities within CartONG. So I'm kind of supervising all the activities linked to OpenStreetMap, and that's why I tried to push this discussion to happen on the business model for digital commons, because I think the challenge that we will discuss today are faced by many organizations. Namely, a lot of them concerned are what we call H2H, I will come back to it later, but also even in larger organizations. So today to discuss this topic, we will have 3 panelists here, plus 1 remotely. So our remote panelist, I will start with him because we will show his presentation first, is Mark Herringer. He's the team lead for healthsites.io, so he will explain in his presentation what his platform is. And he has thought a lot about all the business model aspects of this platform, so his presentation will also be a bit introductory on the topic. So we will show his video, he's recording his presentation because he's currently in Sri Lanka, so he cannot really present even on Skype. I have him on Skype on my phone. We'll see if it's feasible to have a few Q&A at the end, but I'm not real sure. And mostly because our connection here, it's not he's in Sri Lanka, it's here in France, and the connection is horrible, sorry. But we'll have the video anyway. Then we will have Paul. Paul was not here. Paul will be back in a second. So Paul Uithol is the director of community program at the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. He's back, just in time. So I think most of you are already familiar with HAT, and he will probably also present it a little bit. So Paul will present us more on all the different tools, open source tools. The most known one is the Tasking Manager, of course. I think many of you know it. That HAT has been developing, and how they try to build a business model around it to have it both sustainable while respecting the values of the HAT ecosystem. Then we will move to Olivier there. So I think all of you who were yesterday have an idea of what Olivier will be talking about. So he will a bit expand on the fail-fast he did yesterday on Sigma, and more specifically on this business model aspect that he touched yesterday but more developed. And finally, we will conclude with Steven. So Steven Uggowitzer is the president of the EShift partner network, and he has a long history of involvement in the DHIS2 platform. I think also many of you must know the DHIS2, but maybe you can present it a little bit. So Steven is here as our, I would say, success story example of a platform who managed to scale up, build a sustainable business model, and basically everybody will take note to know how you did it, and then we will inspire. Okay. So listen to Mark for his introduction, then Paul for his exploration, Olivier for what not to do, and Steven for Okay, just a very, very short introduction word. So I checked just before the definition of commons. A common traditionally is a cultural and natural resources accessible to all members of a society. So this idea of commons, if you know it, is based on more at a natural level. For instance, all this shared land that peasants used to have in the medieval England, etc. But it has been more and more used in the digital world these days, because we have more and more of these tools that are usable by everybody without restraining the use of each of us. So it's the case, for instance, Wikipedia is a great example, OpenStreetMap as a whole is also a great example, but we can also talk about it for all the software we'll describe today. So obviously, this question of commons is very linked with the question of open source behind it, but I think we will question this a bit, does it have to be open source to be a commons? So this will be part of the discussion. And the last aspect of our question is the question of business model. Because obviously, if you want to build open source, free software, or even in general commons, you have a challenge around the business model for it, because you're not on a standard pay for use model. So we will see how the different panelists tackle it. As I mentioned at the beginning of my introduction, I think it's also pretty linked with this question of the status of your organization. So all of us here actually are from organizations that we call H2H. So I think you've heard the word yesterday with Jude. It means humanitarian to humanitarian. It's a word that is based on the concept of business to business, so companies that provide service to companies, but here it's NGOs providing services to NGOs. And this concept is very strong in the field of information management. We have other organizations here, but ACAPS can also be named, IMAP, REACH. You have a lot of these organizations, MapAction of course, these organizations in the GIS, IM, data management sector. And I think it's also a part of the equation here, because it means we have organizations that not only need to have a sustainable model for their tools, but also for the organization behind it. And I think Rat's example will be very interesting on this aspect. So I'm not going to talk much more for now. I will put Mark's videos, so the first presentation, and after that we will move to the next speaker.
Martin and the team at CartONG, thank you very much for the opportunity to present this slide deck. I'm looking forward to participating in the panel discussion on how to support open source applications in the humanitarian sector. So I'm the project team leader for the Global Health Sites Mapping Project. We're working to establish an accurate baseline of health facility data globally. The way we're doing that is by establishing a data life cycle with OpenStreetMap. We believe that this is the best way to support ministries of health in underserved parts of the world to maintain their master facility list. Our primary user stories or use cases include support for disease outbreak events, vaccination rollout campaigns, and we're focused specifically on Sustainable Development Goal 3.8. We are working to improve our connection with the crowd and users of OpenStreetMap to support our work and receive lists of open data from ministries of health and organizations in the field who have open data policies that allow them to share their data. So to focus the slide deck, I'm interested in understanding how we activate business models focused on sustainable development goals. How do we reach people in underserved parts of the world where their resource opportunity is low? How do we provide them with top-class maternity health care and other elements of Sustainable Development Goal 3.8? What are the incentives for citizens and social startup businesses to support ministries of health, NGOs and private companies with service delivery? The answers I have come up with focus in on including budget line items for social entrepreneurs within the Ministry of Health or organizations and private companies working to improve SDG 3.8. Deployment of social impact bonds is a strong sector and one that has been used in the last 10-20 years. Following the principles of digital development provides a solid groundwork for achieving sustainability, and the Digital Impact Alliance is a resource and organization that is playing a vital role in achieving the sustainability. If we look at the principles for digital development, building for sustainability is one of the key principles and easier said than done, particularly in the humanitarian sector. And this is what I'm looking forward to chatting with the panel and you on in a moment. So the big opportunity we've got is that we are living in a digital world, and we want to take advantage of that. This is a fantastic diagram by Steve Song showing African undersea cables and the connectivity, and this is the opportunity we've got to seize upon and make use of, and it gives us the opportunity to establish diagrams, context diagrams such as this one, because of the connectivity. So at the top of the diagram we have a mobile health user. This is my primary persona. She's a mom in a favela or a township, and she needs support for her maternity care. She has contact with primary healthcare specialists and healthcare organizations who understand her context very well. And what I'm interested in exploring is how to support her and the needs she has, and the activities that community healthcare specialists perform in support of her maternity care, how to support these activities. And I feel the answer comes, and where I'd like to explore more, is developers and infopreneurs who need to understand what these needs are and need to be incentivized to support them. And our governance team is the group that has to try and tweak the system to activate the business model and make use of the open data that is being shared by organizations. So, to conclude then on this diagram, working with primary healthcare organizations to define the user stories, what are her needs, speaking to her directly to understand what she goes through on a day-to-day basis, whether it be getting an ID book for her child or taking the child to the clinic. And how do we monetize opportunities for social entrepreneurs to support her in these activities? So monetizing and providing incentives for citizens to support the Ministry of Health and including a budget line item in their process so that social entrepreneurs have an opportunity to support the Ministry of Health and spend part of their day using their phone to perform these activities. So as a digital producer, I'm always writing user stories, and our primary user story in this particular case is, as a single mom, I want to access healthcare location data so that I can look after the health of my family. So here we are, we're linking a user story to Sustainable Development Goal 3.8, access to healthcare. Now, monetizing the opportunity to support SDG 3.8 looks like, as a social entrepreneur, I want to access monetized opportunities to support the Ministry of Health so that I can earn a living. A hypothetical user story then for this lady is, as a single mom, I want to book a taxi so that I can get to the clinic and present my child for a checkup. The hypothetical user story for the taxi driver looks like, as a taxi driver, I want to take people to the clinic for checkups and earn a living. So, to conclude, I would like to explore and understand the needs of my persona and what her needs are in the form of maternity health care, and how can primary healthcare organizations help me define these user stories. And I feel we need to monetize these activities for social entrepreneurs so that we can engage them and they can support the Ministry of Health and organizations to perform these activities and improve health outcomes on the ground. Health Sites is focused in on improving health capacity data in West Africa, and we value the opportunity to chat to you and work to achieve this goal. Thank you very much.
So I think what was interesting here is that Mark started with an angle that is building a platform for curating health data generally, but we end up with a debate around monetizing activities for the people that support these tools and use these tools. So it's not even like monetizing the platform itself, but like the ecosystem around it. So I think it's a good first example. And now I give the floor to Paul.
Okay.
Let's click.
Go back, maybe. Okay, great. Thanks. Good morning. I'm Uithol. I work with Humanitarian as Director of Programs, which basically means that I, day to day-to-day life and manage more, basically all our field teams, all our projects on the ground. And basically those are all, we make heavy use of all the infrastructure and tooling that we have. Basically what we've identified no years back is that there's an overarching need for better maps. Louder, please. Okay, there's what just done up. Maybe that's easier. What all of us are, say, aware of and have identified a couple of years back, or long ago, is that there's an overarching need for better maps and data across the humanitarian sector. And then we don't mean, say, single-use maps and data, someone collects it, stores it on a local laptop, off we go. But a number of organizations have sort of started piloting using OpenStreetMap as a shared open data source repository, as a source for data where it can be shared, distributed, used for coordination, operational purposes, etc. Around, say, that data source, we've started building a number of tools and processes to support the use and applicability of the data, that open data source, for humanitarian and development actors. That includes a number of tools. The one we'll be focusing on today is mostly Task Manager. Basically the ones that you'd use both from a remote perspective, so that organizations can use both to get a better understanding of situations, say from headquarters level, but also the ones the ones that allow you to basically procure, set up data tasks, get up-to-date mapping for a certain area where you'll be getting operations started on the ground, grab the data, and use it to inform operations. And it doesn't really matter in that sense whether those are operations around health or education or disaster response, or whether it's cash-based assistance type programs where you basically have a better understanding of populations, markets, economic activity, etc. So this sort of, it's basically a really rough outline of what we use ourselves in some of our field projects. You need to know where you need data, what type of data you need, get imagery, get remote mapping, basically in order to allow you to get a better map set up. The remote mapping is where the Task Manager comes in, which is basically leveraging a large global community of volunteers that are basically volunteering their time and efforts in order to help us get better data. Set up, in our case, for the field programs, you set up then surveying locally, start to enrich that map with local data. So what the Task Manager allows you to get from satellite imagery is mostly, it's sort of a limited set of data. It's basic infrastructure, it's buildings, it's roads. You may be able to tell which buildings are schools from the air, just due to the shape and the size of the buildings, but that's about it. You always need to link it up with additional local data, local knowledge. And for example, the data that Mark is also collecting through house sites, see what data you can import from government sources to get a proper operation overview. Make sure you have accurate, correct data, and then you can use it to, for example, inform food distribution and other emergency response or development, and so on. There's a couple that are specifically interesting for, say the dual use in the sense that you can use it from, say, a headquarters type overview remotely in order to gather more data. One is Open Aerial Map, which is a platform we've developed for basically hosting and distribution of aerial imagery from various sources. This complements what commercial satellite providers provide to us, say Digital Globe, mostly in a couple of others, Airbus. There's the Task Manager, which sort of goes hand in hand with missing maps. And that's actually where the business models perspective of this panel comes in. So, for example, this is a really recent task around Sri Lanka floods. It also illustrates, say, the range of actors which are using these tools. So, for example, this one has been directly requested by the Disaster Management Department of Sri Lanka. And then lastly, you also, once you have procured, created all this data, you also need a way to access it, to use it. And that's where the export tool comes in, which is basically a web tool that allows you to grab targeted exports from OpenStreetMap. And we've recently, last year, also build, say, a bridge to the humanitarian data exchange. So we're setting up regular exports at the country level for various sectors towards the humanitarian data exchange. That's something which OCHA has helped us with. Can't play this, but is there anyone who's not familiar with, say, the concept of a map-informed tasking manager? Or does everyone have a basic understanding? I think we'll skip this in the interest of time. But later, this is a really good example of how basically we're getting also corporate interest and people to volunteer their time and effort towards this purpose. Again, this is something where the business models angle comes in. So it's a function of basically time and attention, which makes it also useful and valuable to companies to be investing in this ecosystem. And what you're noticing, say the progress we've made over the past couple of years, is that we're not getting to the point that companies are actually offering us time and money basically, and well, the time of their employees to help us create this data through the Missing Maps Task Manager platform. Why are they doing this? Because they feel it's a very good well use of their time and money basically. And in some of these map funds, they're noticing if they just offer volunteer opportunities to their employees, there's maybe 1 or 2% of employees that will participate. With some of these really direct impact type volunteering activities, that rises to maybe 10, 15, 20% of employees that are actually making an effort and getting invested. Our general strategies, this is basically, say, the core of our organization, let's say. Everything we do is open data, open source by default. This is also part of the origins that we have in, say, the OpenStreetMap community, OpenStreetMap Foundation. From one perspective, it is sort of a technical endeavor with all benefits and also disadvantages that come along with that. All the tools that we create, well, not all of them, but most of them are built on top of supplementing work by the OSMF, existing infrastructure, with OpenStreetMap, Overpass, ID, JavaScript editors, etc. And with everything we do, we want to be as transparent and open as we can be. And just to give you a bit of perspective, we're a small organization. It's about 20 staff, spread across 10 countries at the moment. Most of them are, say, in-field projects in the field. Actual, say, senior, well, people that are actually doing, say, management and not directly on field projects is, I think, about 4 or 5 people. Spread across 5 continents as well. We have quite a bit of staff in country. It's voting members, but then a really big chunk is community. And so the big value of Humanitarian OpenStreetMap and the task manager is in that community. There's the people that are helping us volunteering their time and effort to be creating this data, and that basically see this as a way, a more, well, maybe not accountable, but more direct way of contributing to humanitarian response and development than just donating a bit of money, say €5 to some bank account when a disaster happens, but that really want to be involved and also want to get that feedback. Like, I've contributed, say, on Saturday afternoon to do mapping for Sri Lanka flooding. How is the data being used? What was the result of me volunteering my time to that? So that's basically, I think, also where part of the innovation talk from just now comes in. It's in that way enabling people to have a much more direct impact in these situations. Usage of tasking manager. Statistics we've made, and last month there were about 200,000 actions, which is basically users requesting pages, mapping a task, etc. across, say, the 3-4 core hot tools that we have. This task manager, this tasks basically, let's take one step back maybe. What is a task? A task means that some organization or individual or whatever has some need for data maps in a certain part of the world. That can be an NGO, it can be a government agency, like the Disaster Management Agency in Sri Lanka. It can be an individual that's running some operation, some project in the country. So if we'll get to Missing Maps in a bit, Missing Maps is a consortium of 10-20 NGOs which all have acute data needs for their teams in countries where they have active projects at some point or another. But in addition to that, there's also 50, 60 active OpenStreetMap communities which run small local projects, and we're also trying to foster that community. So when I speak about community a while back, there's 100,000, say, global volunteers maybe. A lot of that will be, say, focused concentrated in Europe, in the US, basically people with time to spare. But there's also a lot of local communities in Sub-Saharan Africa, basically all these countries that have dots on the map, in South America, in Southeast Asia, where there's just university students or people that want to make a difference in their country and need to have better data than they can get from government sources, which are often quite incomplete or outdated in these countries. So what you can do then is go to Tasking Manager, and one of them, say maybe stumbling blocks there is how do you get access to that? That's a separate question. Who gets the request task for what purpose? We have, say, strongly humanitarian development focus. One of the nice things about all the projects being open source is that you can also take it, run it somewhere else. So the hub task manager is not the only task manager. And there's also OSM.Earth, which is more an environmental one. And the Indonesia team has their own, Mapbox has their own in India, Facebook has their own for a bunch of development they do, etc. So we really focus on our task manager on humanitarian type tasks. And at the moment, yeah, it's about tasks in about 50 more countries over. This is a bit of a long slide. Basically, this is a somewhat of the full. How much time?
4 or 5 minutes.
Sure. I'll hurry up a bit. I'm not going to go over all this, but basically, when it comes to again business model, what we're looking at, a lot of say the inputs and the people wanting to work with us. Basically, they get in at step 4. So that's where global volunteers come in. That's where organizations requesting a task and actually wanting to have the outputs of that come in. That's where corporate partners come in the business model. But there's a whole process along that where you need to decide as an organization that is using this data, what data you want, what you need it for. Make sure you deliver quality data. And again, OpenStreetMap is a shared resource, so that also puts a bit of responsibility on the people requesting the data to make sure they deliver clean, quality data that others can use again to build upon and improve upon. Let's move on a bit. And say the business model that we've that is sort of emerged, let's say, has mostly come about through Missing Maps, and that's a consortium of a number of large NGOs, with founding organizations being American Red Cross, British Red Cross, Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, and Médecins Sans Frontières. And basically, it's what is it? A consortium and collaboration of NGOs, but also say it's branding. Basically, it's something that works well in fundraising. So all these organizations and also the members listed below, so also MapAction, CartONG, and other organizations present here. A lot of these are using this as some way to raise funding for their operations, drawing attention to the fact that a large chunk of the population in this world is being left behind in the sense of not being on the map, not being accounted for in government policy, in aid, in emergency response, etc. And it's something that every organization has their own niche in this sense. But for example, American Red Cross has several hundred fundraisers full-time asking people to donate to Missing Maps. And everyone in this consortium is basically contributing to the Missing Maps consortium. And that's funding that's going into maintaining the infrastructure, into running it, into looking at opportunities for development, for innovation. So, come on, is it working? Some of the challenges we have there are around technology. So there's a lot of partners in this consortium which all have their own priorities, their own things they emphasize. So what direction and what type of innovation are we pursuing, are we prioritizing? There's communications between all the partners involved in the consortium. Funding is always, well, an issue, obviously, like we also just saw in Laura's talk. There's a plethora of project-based funding, but actual, and also say innovation funding at the initiation phase. So getting funding to do something once and have a good idea and implement it, you can get that. But say I have a project but I want to improve it, is already a lot harder to get. And there's a large, this sort of links to the technology part. There's a large consortium of stakeholders, each with their own priorities, but we have to be careful that this doesn't become like a donor-driven thing, an innovation, or something where MSF and ARC are dictating the requirements and what gets implemented, while the power and the huge value and benefit of it derives from having this community of members which is actually willing to contribute their time. So those are the people we also need to mind and make sure they have a good user experience and feel that what they're doing actually has a direct contribution to these projects, and also get the feedback from the organizations on how the data is valuable, is basically saving lives. How do we support SDGs? Running over time, so I'll hurry up. There's grants for the big chunks of development. USAID Geocenter has recently funded the development of the latest version of the tasking manager. There's Missing Maps as a network, which is basically pooling funding together, which is deriving from being able to leverage Missing Maps as a brand again. So it adds value for everyone to have this brand. There's corporate partnerships, as I touched upon, which is basically using the tasking manager and getting the employees to map as a form of CSR. And there's a small part of it is individual donations. A couple of organizations that have made a lot of use of this past couple of years: Salesforce, Accenture, a couple of others. Let's get over that. Areas of development on tasking manager is something that is indeed the internal conversation within Missing Maps. One of the big things coming on the horizon, well, there's two things at the moment, basically. There's validation, so how do we make sure all these people that we bring into the ecosystem provides good quality data that adds value to the overall ecosystem, and that we can make sure to also clean up. And the other thing is, what is going to be the impact of machine learning, AI assisted mapping, etc. On the niche that this tool is filling. That's it. Salut. Yeah.
Okay. How many of you were not at the Fail Fest yesterday evening? Okay, so it's worth to make a brief presentation of what is Sigma, because the others have already been aware of what it is. So my name is Olivier Sarrat. I'm working for Groupe for the past 11 years. Then I say yesterday during the Fail Fest, those are maybe my 3 last days of work. After 10 years working on the Sigma project, and decided to move to other horizons. And I'm very, very glad to support you during this GOG conference to be able to share the lessons of this project, which has been useful in terms of learning for many actors and stakeholders inside the project, but we also believe that the overall innovation experience we had could be useful to others, and so we're happy to share today. Sigma in a nutshell. So I won't show you the videos that I tried to do yesterday. It's a pity because here we have better sound, but I think it would be faster to give you in brief what are the lessons of this video. Basically, Sigma is an open source, multilingual tool to help project management within humanitarian organization. It's a very flexible tool. All the idea is that any organization who use it can easily configure it in a way to really adapt to its own needs and to have quick cycles of evolutions of this configuration so that it can adapt to the way they are managing projects. So it's based on the concept of project cycle, on quality, etc. So that's the global idea of Sigma. It's an internal project management system. Okay. But I think Okay, so we get the video, but we won't have it. Next. So what are the key characteristics of this innovation? First of all, it started by a request from 3 NGOs in 2008. 3 NGOs come to see Groupe URD because we had in the past some experience with software. So we decided to make a need assessment because those NGOs came to us to say, oh, we may have the same needs. So we make a need assessment on 6 organizations and we found out that the needs were converging. So that's how it started. Then we decided to start a participatory process of a group of 10 to 12 organizations. Half of them were really active in this process. So the whole steering of this project has been done by a group of organizations. From the very beginning, Groupe URD has played a key role, but as a facilitator of this group, as the implementing partner of the decision of the group. And Groupe URD, for those who are not familiar with this organization, is a non-profit research institute based in Provence. We are doing operational research, training, evaluation, and developing tools and methods. We are one of the 3 authors of the core human standard, for example, based on our previous work on quality. And it's because of this key role we have in quality since 2000 that we've been involved in software. That's why we've been called by NGOs to start this Sigma project. Finally, last key characteristic, so it's open source software. And since Groupe URD is a research institute, we decided from the very beginning not to develop software by ourselves, because we are not an IT specialist, we need to rely on subcontractors to do this job and technical partners. Quickly, there were 5 key periods for those 10 years. First, we started with this initial assessment I mentioned already. Then we get quickly first funding to start a pilot phase. So we developed a first version which has been released in June 2011. Then we have crossed what I've called yesterday the desert of starvations, 2 years without any big grants. So it has been a tough time, and we have proven that we were resilient. We managed to continue to progress, but without any substantial funding. And we then get funding from the AFD for a last period of funding, which has been quite long, from end of 2013 to end of 2017. During which we developed a new version, we started a new model, a new business model I will present. We also developed a new website, etc., etc. But it was also difficult because, as we may know, the idea is only giving you half of the sum you need. You need to fund half of the co-funding, and so we've been chasing the funding all the time. And we end up this period with an evaluation from an external evaluator, who's Laura Walker-Hudson, that you saw this morning, which has helped us to have a clearer picture on what were the difficulties we were facing. Now we could eventually go beyond these difficulties. So at the end of this evaluation phase, and then we come to the talk of this today, we have interpreted this evaluation as we have 2 key problems. One problem in terms of relevance. We believe that our software was not relevant enough. Of course, the needs we were targeting were still here. We still haven't found a proper solution in open source able to really help operations in humanitarian organizations. So the needs are here, but the reply we developed was not perfectly relevant. We needed to be adapt the tool to be more relevant. One of the biggest mistakes was we have tried to cover a very wide range of needs without starting to really reply deeply to one need itself. So it was basically doing many things, but not one single thing with full advantage for the users. So that's one of our mistakes. That's for relevance. And the other key problem we have was sustainability. Because the key reason was that our finance were not yet balanced. I mean, we haven't yet found a business model providing enough income to run without any major grant behind us. We have a problem of governance. The governance was quite poor. And last but not least, we found out that this project for a research institute like Groupe URD was a bit painful. So it's a problem of sustainability because we found out we were potentially not the right home to hold this project. Groupe URD has a key role to play in the sense that it's a neutral actor. Many of the stakeholders of the Sigma project say that the project won't wouldn't be possible without Groupe because it's neutral. It's not an operational NGO. It's an HUH, as you mentioned. But at the same time, we are not specialists in IT, and so it was not easy for us to manage such a big innovation at that time. So when we saw all this set of problems, we decided that the key stuff we should change first is who will be the next home for Sigma. And then from this new home, it will have impact on the government, impact on the business model, impact on the tool. But we should start with that. So end of 2017 and starting 2008, we started to work on the takeover. And so we found, finally, one organization ready to take over Sigma in the form of a merge. And so now Sigma is merging with Stardata, which is another open source tool for project management, but which has, we believe and we're sure, much stronger roots to be able to scale up. But I'm not here to present Stardata, I'll let you get in touch with them. So that's the story. So, what were our business models? Globally, the brilliant idea we had with open source is, okay, if we use open source, it's great. We can do two things at the same time. We can get public funding because it's open source, it's digital common. It's wonderful. At the same time, we can sell services to NGOs, etc., which will, in the end, maybe invest in the software when we develop new features, etc. So it's a great model for our sector. We believe it was a brilliant idea. What was more tricky is more how not to manage investments, but how to manage daily expenditures. And so we tried two models within 2 different periods. First, we started, as I mentioned yesterday, a bit naively, I would say, believing that we could have, from a group of NGOs, ask contributions made more or less freely to try to cover our daily expenditures. They were 10 to 12 from very small to quite big NGOs. Some had up to 200 million budgets every year. So if they all invest, we could just manage the daily expenditures and grow up. But it didn't work that much because the software was not very satisfactory for them. So it was hard for them to justify to pay yearly in the project. And so we never been able to make this project balance. So during the period 2014 to 2017, we started to think, okay, we need to change our business model. We need to find a way which is more sustainable. The innovation retreat we did as part of the accelerating the donate to scale funding from the Humanitarian Innovation Fund was also a very interesting time for us to think about our business model. So we decided to move to a more classical freemium model where you have two versions, one which is almost free, and the other one which is more expensive, where we have more capacities, more features, etc. That's a classical model. So that's the latest business model we've developed. The only part which has never been come true is this automated customer relations. But basically our idea was to target medium and large NGO mostly, based on the help of key partners, which were first steering cooperatives, so this group of NGOs, because when you go to the Sigma website, you see the logo of 12 supporting NGOs, so it gives trust in the solution, it's really important. The help of software companies, the help of donors. The key activities we developed were, of course, software development, but we also provide support to adoption to NGOs, and we do, of course, technical support and maintenance. Our value proposition was to help to make project management more efficient. That was the central things. But for user, what's also important was the open source nature of Sigma, and the ethics behind it was really important to try our solution and to persevere with us. The fact that we were able to provide professional support was we had, as I say, software companies able to run the software, host it, etc. And Groupe has also a very strong capacity in terms of support to organizations, in terms of quality, in terms of process, in terms of parameterization of the tool. We also support organizations in terms of their thinking on quality. If they want to start to have a continuous improvement cycle on quality, Sigma was a really appropriate tool for that, so we could support them for that as well. Our tool was, of course, very, very, very attractive to users because it was very, very affordable. Our users in the evaluation we had said they found it very, very cheap, and they were very happy because it was supportive for them to try things with very low barrier in terms of finance. And finally, we hoped in the future to become more interoperable. Okay, I won't describe more the business model, but basically it was based in terms of revenue streams. First, we were selling service package fees that we show you later on. We were also having contracts to support adoptions in terms of training, in terms of parameterization, mostly in terms of migration of data. And finally, some users were requesting new features to say, okay, I want to have this feature, so we were charging them and developing the feature inside the software. That's basically how the business model was working. When you saw this slide, you can say, okay, it can work. And so what didn't work in the end? What didn't work is that we never been able to find enough full service packages and enough users in the end. Why? Because, as I said, one of the reasons is because the tool was not relevant enough in terms of added value to users, because it was able to target a very big range of needs, but not a single need was really replied with full value for the users. So we have never been able to reach the critical mass of users to have a balanced business model. So this business model could work with a better tool, but that's not what we get. So it's a classical freemium model. Of course, we had the free version, which was no cost at all. You just download the tool and you're alone on Earth. The basic service package that you have hosting at a very limited price. I mean, for very small organizations, it's still possible to have the software. And then you have the full service package, where you have all features, including contact management, and much higher price. But then you have also a commitment from us to fix bugs. The basic hosting is really almost like you download software and install it on your own server, and you're alone. But at least it's very affordable. That's what we try. And technically speaking, we remain fully open source in the sense that the version you download here was available both as a binary, as a software you can install as in a source code. And the source code of the full version was available, but not the binary was not available. That's how we managed to, at very limited cost, be able to have a full open source project without having to share two repositories, etc. But I can speak of tech if some people are interested on this topic. I go back on the lesson learned. It's what I said yesterday, but sometimes we say that learning is just using a hammer and repeating. And for those who were not here, I think it's still important. So first key lessons was about ideas and results, that ideas are great for mobilizing. Some of our users say when they try to promote the tools within the organization, they were more promoting the dream than the reality. So the collective dream we have, the vision we have, is very, very important for a vision. You cannot sustain and you cannot have the stamina to be able to continue the long term if you don't have a strong vision. So that's very important for mobilization, but it's not enough. And as I said yesterday, you have to maximize the added value of your or each of your iteration. As I said earlier, we've targeted a too wide range of needs without replying fully to one single need. And our first iteration should have been to select one or two needs only and make a hard choice and say, okay, for these needs, we want to provide the maximum added value. And so that's something really important to mention. So you need to balance always between the great visions we should far in the future, at the same time to try on each iteration to have the maximum added value for all of your users. That's really important. Second is about the fact that conducting an innovation is really in itself a job. And our sector along the past 10 years has really evolved. We started in 2008. At that time, Halnap and NTN made this report on innovation. So innovation wasn't yet a big word as it is now. And our sector is evolving in understanding what are the requirements to conduct properly an innovation. But Groupe, which is part of the sector, also made the same mistake as many others, that underestimating what it requires in terms of knowledge, skills, capacity, funds. You need millions to be able to run this project. We never get this level of money. Next lesson learned is about risk and anticipation. If you like, innovation management is great. It's very risky because, of course, you're trying new things, but it could be exciting. But you need to manage risk in a very blank manner and very transparent. You need to look at risk right in the face and not hope that the risk will solve by itself because you're supported by great people and great organizations. It doesn't work that way. And actually facing risk is really the right time to start to learn on your innovation. The example I gave yesterday, we re-give to now, is we started the project, as I say, with a group of 10 to 12 organizations, but without having to write a proper terms of reference on this partnership. We never have signed our members a terms of reference for the partnership. And as a consequence, we never came to a commitment from the organization on the paper, and so the discussion hasn't been deep enough on what does it mean to be a Sigma partner? What are my roles? What are my duties? What can I expect from Groupe? What can I expect from the other partners? And so we've never speak blankly to the fact that we need money to run this project, and it cannot just be free contributions because it won't work. And so, because we just believe it will be enough to have a general principles, that we have a document of principle for this collaboration, but not true documents. We haven't been anticipating this risk enough, and so it's one of the crucial things about money. We haven't faced it enough from the very beginning. So just look at this. It can be tension, but it could be exciting because you're really discussing deeply what are the topic of your project. Oops. Last, it's about experimentation and learning. We can consider that Sigma didn't manage to change the way most organizations in the humanitarian sector were managing projects. We failed on that. But many of our users said that this Sigma was a kind of sandbox where they could try things in the organization at a low cost. They've been able to flexibly adapt using our flexible project model to try how they could have an internal operation system within the organizations. And so it was a great opportunity for them on this point. On other points, it was an opportunity for many organizations to start to understand what are the difficulties and the requirements behind an IT project, and to understand the level of investment it requires. Because when they attended those meetings, we start to give to them the figures, how much it costs. It also has been a very good opportunity for them to learn. And finally, we have been very, on the Sigma project, it was a collective project, and because Groupe has also, in its roots, a very strong culture regarding open evaluation. It has been a very transparent process where we can, as I'm here now, be sitting and sharing the knowledge with others. So the innovation project itself has also been an opportunity for learning for the sector. So that's also very important that if you are trying innovation, just try to, if you fail, because failure is definitely part of the innovation process, that will be a party yesterday night. If you fail, you need at least to share the knowledge afterwards. And it's a pity that many innovations failings are lost in the drawer of some organization and are not shared, because we could, as a sector, learn faster if we were sharing our news, even if it's a 10 years failure, that you need to share it with others. Okay, that's it for me regarding those topics. Thank you.
I'll try. Okay, here we go. Hi everybody, my name is Steven. It's interesting for me to come last because actually all of the challenges that were described in 3 previous presentations, you might as well replace the tool with DHIS2, and we've either seen it in the past, are living through it, experienced it, are fearful of it in the future, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, all of these lessons I think are great lessons learned to talk about any software engineering exercise that tries to get larger and sort of go to scale. How many people have heard of DHIS2 before? A lot of you have. How many have actually used something of DHIS2? Okay. How many have, okay, that's probably, anybody developed something in DHIS2 but never used it? No? Okay. All right, a little bit of history just about me quickly. My name's Steven Uggowitzer, as I said. I'm an engineer by training from Canada, and I spent about 15 years working for the World Health Organization, mostly doing IT projects, infrastructure things. And I kind of transitioned away from working for the organization and working a lot with ministries of health. And it's through my work with ministries of health where I learned about these Norwegian people up in the University of Oslo who build this package called DHIS2. In fact, back about 10 years ago, I had a pile of them working for me at WHO. They were seconded to us by the Norwegian government. And I mention that because it's actually interesting in the sense of sort of the evolution of DHIS2 and how the people who build this product work. They're not afraid to go into the belly of the beast of big UN organizations and actually try to sort of figure out like what's going on there and what are the needs. And it's been a big sort of learning exercise. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to give you a background on DHIS2. I'm not going to mention business models or digital commons or the humanitarian sector or anything like that till the very end. But really this whole presentation is a story in some ways of how something got from one place to where we are today with this package, or platform as we now tend to like to call it. I'm in Geneva, by the way, and part of the DHIS2 success story, which I'll get into, has to do with sort of the network of partners that are involved in making DHIS2 work for people, which is generally called HISP, or the Health Information System Strengthening Program, and I kind of represent that in Geneva. And if anybody wants more of a background on that, come talk to me afterwards. So that's 2 minutes, and I have 12 more minutes to talk about something that started in 1994 as a collaboration between the University of Oslo, NORAD, and the University of Western Cape down in South Africa. And DHIS2 didn't start off as a piece of software. It started off as a project to build sort of a global action network around learning around how to do health information system strengthening in countries. All right? What is needed to better manage information, collect, analyze, report, and sort of out of that came DHIS2 version 1 at the University of Western Cape and in South Africa, which was based on Microsoft Access. And about 12 years ago now, work started on DHIS version 2, which is a much more comprehensive, big sort of Java-based program that has grown into a giant octopus over sort of many years. It's an open source platform. As I said, it's focused historically and still its broad uses on reporting, analysis, and dissemination of data for all sorts of health programs and activities. All right. It has become, in many countries, sort of the shared integrated data warehouse for all essential health data. And we like to really think about it as, if you're going to use data, information for action, that is sort of the vision of why people want to use DHIS2, right? You bring this information together and you can sort of work on it and use it. It aggregates any kind of data you want, events, patient-level information. Really, it's a Swiss Army knife. I come from Switzerland. Swiss Army knife for all sort of data management. It is and always will be, in terms of the vision, a generic platform. The only thing about DHIS2 that has to do with health is the H in the name. All right. People use it for education. People use it for tracking wells. People use it for all sorts of things. And I encourage you all to look at it for your own experiments. I hear about people using it in the private sector for really odd things that it was never intended for. It's a very open, easy platform that people can just kind of innovate on. Okay? Doesn't have to do with health, and I strongly encourage people to remember that a little bit. The financing and the support comes really today from all global health agencies and actors, from WHO, NORAD, the Global Fund for AIDS, Tuberculosis, Malaria, PEPFAR, which is the US President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, which funds a lot of HIV activities in Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, the Gates Foundation, UNICEF, Gavi, Global Alliance Vaccine, CDC, PATH. Many people have aligned and gone behind this. The University of Oslo has also recently, in the last year and a half, 2 years, become a collaborating center with WHO on health information systems. So it's like sort of the reference go-to sort of linkage. And DHIS2 is used in 88 countries at this point in time, all right? The growth has kind of looked like this. This is an interesting graph. It's a very nice graph, it goes up. The darker brown color represents Indian states, which we all consider like countries, because frankly, most of them are many countries in size. So, so adoption, that's sort of where the adoption curve has gone. If you noted at the beginning of the presentation, the presentation was called the world's largest health information system. That surprised me. This presentation was actually first given to the Norwegian Foreign Affairs Group, and I translated part of this slide deck into English, and I was like, wow, they're calling it the world's biggest health information system. How can we do that? But actually, if you look at sort of the global footprint today in terms of population and data being managed around DHIS2, we're talking about 2.28 billion people that have some form of aggregate data or something represented in these tools, which is pretty impressive. 60 NGOs or so involved, 58 countries around the PEPFAR organization that I mentioned earlier, and big NGOs like PSI and other global organizations have all sort of adopted and used it. It came to be really through a methodology, and then I think this is really, really important listening to some of the other presentations earlier on about sort of how this system grew. The system grew through something called action research. I'm personally allergic to pilots and like doing pilotitis in a country and kind of learning for things and using countries to experiment with, but if I ever were to imagine a best case example of how people truly formalize the process of working with people in countries, working with NGOs to gather requirements, bring them in, and then innovate based on those requirements, I can't think of a better example of how that was done successfully than DHIS2. Its strength really comes through the building and sustaining of this network, and the focus has always been on ministries of health and a term called participatory action or participatory design, if you will, around products. That has been hosted within the University of Oslo and frankly a lot of other university and more academically oriented organizations, but ones that really have a focus on getting things done and having the academics be tied to actively achieving something on the ground. It's almost like the Norwegian Stanford model, if you will. Like we do stuff, right, but it's actually done under the auspices of some sort of an academic umbrella. And from a sustainability standpoint, listening to some of the other presentations earlier on, I think that's been key to kind of keeping things going, because there's always that engine going, which is funded through other mechanisms through academia. Through this program, 50 PhDs have graduated over the last 15 years. 30 of them are still active in this community. And there are international master's programs around this topic that's been created all around the world, which again really feeds this network. Not appropriate for all kinds of pieces of software, but when you're talking about a big platform, having this kind of network around to support it, I think is essential. And each of them sort of find their own ways of supporting and sustaining themselves. Training is done through regional academies. I've taught in a whole pile of them on systems administration and IT governance and security as well. We've run about 87 of them since 2011. 4,800 people graduated, which is, again, this network that is so important, I think, to build. And really, that's sort of become fundamental of sort of building this capacity strengthening, the development of the platform sort of coming together with local innovation because of all these people who got trained, and then you begin to sort of meet a sustainable objective to sort of run things, which is the rocket ship kind of picture at the bottom there. Like we're all kind of heading towards sustainability goals. So DHIS2 it's a platform for, and it really, in and of itself, a global public good. The product is open source, and it is mostly developed by the University of Oslo, but there are a ton of these HIS partners that all fulfill different roles in terms of the platform, but also in terms of implementations in countries. And all of these sort of activities increasingly are sponsored by the collaboration with global agencies and NGOs who've all kind of seen it much more logical to align to one platform than to kind of do things separately. And this is sort of the big shift that happened, where I think we've been very lucky, where before it's a whole sort of set of products that people want to use, and more people are kind of settling down to one, all right? And that's a really challenging and scary place to be in. And it's one where you kind of have to be very humbled, I think, to say, okay, well, everybody wants to use this, now what, right? It's a big challenge. Two major things happened to get us there over the last little while in health. The first one was PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief in the US. They'd spent something like $1 billion on software to do monitoring and evaluation. And they threw it all away. And they use DHIS2 now. Like a US organization is using DHIS2. It's made by a Scandinavian university to run their stuff. That's kind of awesome. The second thing that's really happened that's been interesting in the last year or so is organizations like WHO, UNICEF, those that have normative roles in terms of defining how data is organized and structured, have started to articulate their data needs, their indicators, their visualizations, how to look at information in the DHIS2 platform. When I worked at WHO, people wrote books. Like, here's the book on your 100 key indicators, good luck, right? Not very useful, right? We've transitioned now to these things being articulated through DHIS2 by these organizations, which I think is fantastic because it offers an opportunity for semantic comparability of data across many countries, and it offers an opportunity for countries to work together to talk about how they represent their data, how they analyze their data, how to promote use. All of these things can be much better aligned because we're talking about something actually on a piece of software. And having worked for WHO for many years, that was something we never did because we don't like to advocate one product. But now we have this wonderful global guidance and tools within DHIS2 for health information. I'd love to see one for the humanitarian sector as well one day. Hint, hint, wink, wink, right? And this set of tools now, we've got about half dozen of them or so for TB, malaria, immunization. These are all HIV, mortality, morbidity, verbal autopsy. There's a variety of them now being built that are sort of the core sets of information that you would need to have to run any kind of program like this in your country, all right? Kind of important and really, really critical. I'm going to go a bit faster even through these other slides because I'm running short of time and I want to stick to it so we can have some questions. Through its open platform, there's actually a lot of opportunity for innovation now around the platform. It has an open API. We see people approaching us to talk about things like using biometrics with the system. And it has, lately, we've released a brand new Android software development kit, which I think is going to drive a hell of a lot more innovation because it's going to become very easy for you to develop your own Android apps on the platform. This is sort of the visual on what it does and what the vision is of how we integrate data from multiple sources, how it is a data warehouse, and how it can provide dashboarding maps through actually OpenStreetMap, and there's good partnership and integration with partners there. And okay, I already mentioned the Android SDK. I'll jump through that. If you guys really don't know DHIS2, lots of awesome customizable dashboards, GIS, visuals, very easy to build. And because you can build them consistently and share them with the community, you can really build communities for action around, in this case, health workers in Indonesia, where we've been working to sort of train them up on. So how do you use your data? How do you compare, your particular region or district to somebody else's? How do you work together? This whole energy around using the platform both as a means to analyze your data, but even a means to build a community around who the people are using the platform is extremely important. Ebola and disease surveillance is on everybody's mind. It probably still is. There was and still is a significant involvement of the DHIS2 community in West Africa around the what's it called, the CDC global health security agenda and sort of strengthening capacity around surveillance apps. This points to another interesting area where we've sort of emerged into with DHIS2. It started off as a platform to manage aggregate information, so statistics. More and more, though, people are using another part of the system which allows you to manage individual record data. So you can actually put patient data into the system and quasi-manage workflow around that. And that becomes interesting for things like building referral systems or surveillance, disease surveillance and response systems. Or track wells and the status of wells, or something else. Yeah.
You have 2-3 minutes left,
yeah.
So can you maybe focus a bit more on the journey and less on the results?
Yeah.
That's more
okay. Sure. This has been the journey to get there. Okay. So let me get to. I'll skip through the slides and I'll get to something else. Just to talk about the business model. The three presentations we have up front, it was interesting to me to listen to them because each group sort of optimized, I think, on different facets of business models, and different groups have been sort of more successful on ones versus the other. If people ask me sort of in the journey what got us to where we're going, some of it was luck, some of it was just perseverance. But I think the most important thing was engaging with the community, engaging with our users, and being most responsive to the user needs, and being able to feedback in a regular life cycle, improving the product sort of around this system. If none of you have seen this slide on the Open Business Model Canvas, I highly recommend anytime you start a project to go look at it and try to answer the questions around what these boxes are. So you showed it before as well. I think it's a great place to start when you're analyzing any kind of project activity. How much of the role of open source was relevant in DHIS2? I would say in some ways, I mean, it had to be open source and it has to be open source, but it's minimal. What the open sourceness has done is provided sort of a canvas for opportunity in terms of building networks and working with other people. And the fact that you can just have the software is great, but it's secondary to really the building of the network and building of the collaboration around the system. And somehow the University of Oslo, I think, has found a sort of winning formula for both innovating, but creating a sustainable, scalable system, all right? And so some challenges and some opportunities, just very, very quickly. It's become a very open platform and a very interoperable platform. Okay, you can glue things into it. You have an API, you can connect to it. There's a tension, I think, in all these, in our sector at least, of building a monolithic application, like everybody just use DHIS2 versus piecing together lots of systems. And this is something I think is really important if you're working with ministries where capacity for installing and sustaining software is actually often not there. Once people invest in DHIS2, we see people actually really wanting to use it for everything. And therein there are strengths, but there are also risks, all right? So people are wanting to use mobile with it. Of course, you counter that with what do we do about GDPR? People want to start managing individual records in it, so privacy, security, infrastructure issues. These are all challenges that we're facing more and more because people are using the system more and more. And while the software is very mature, sort of the policies around this and how to approach these issues are perhaps not as mature, and we sort of need to deal with it. Again, the strength is the open community, engaging and sharing a stake in the system. In the last year, another important element that's going to help DHIS2 is the World Health Assembly passed a resolution on digital health, where they actually talk about IT. It's sort of the first time that health actors have said IT and health is really, really important. And I think that's going to spur on a lot of development and even funding sort of tied to this system. I like to say we've reached critical mass for a critical system, right? And to get there has been a long slog, but now we sort of have to maintain that and keep things going. And we keep it going by an innate awareness of the challenges of what it takes to develop things and deploy things. I mean, we've had the school of hard knocks and lessons learned on how long it takes to develop things, how expensive software development is, how hard it is to manage a big community and bring all sorts of different data sets together, like in the mapping world. And yeah, that's sort of where we're at today. And we all need you to help. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
So we are already quite late and we don't have a lot of time left, like around 10 minutes. So very short time for questions. What I could suggest you is if you want to cut a little bit on the next coffee break, we can probably stay a bit more, but that's up to you. So, questions?
Hi, I work at the French Agency for Development. We are not focused, I work for the French Agency for Development. We are not primarily focused on humanitarian sector or on IT, and we have been very bad at that. We have been financing patches of national health information systems for decades that are just horrible, and now we see with a lot of interest the EShift that is spreading continuously, but there is a lot of cultural change to foster internally to have people embracing these kind of things. Many people with us have a strong lack of trust into these vertical programs because it's often presented as opposed to national health systems, and therefore the EShift being promoted by this way is not very good for the image. So we are trying, the guys who understand a bit more about what it is about, try to sensitivize our colleagues, and I hope that our health unit will soon embrace this system in the countries we work in. It's not our job to finance ITs, but we are trying to go into this direction and wonder how to do it, because it's not one of our mandates. We were thinking to somehow, in our position, we work on evaluation and monitoring at this, and promoting the way of developing patches functionalities, like it could be, for instance, something that has to do with automatic recognition of buildings in something, and financing an algorithm that would be open and could be reusable for your tax manager or something else, or to have something, for instance, that has to do with integrating some Sarrat, so service availability readiness and assessment, into the HES2, something like that to monitor quality of services. Is this kind of, from a donor perspective, is this kind of very one shots or specific shots we are not able to sustain a platform, but financing some patches, is it the kind of support that is helpful in your business models, or is it not counterproductive?
I think those. I mean, if your focus is on individual projects in countries where you see the kinds of activities that you listed as being helpful, then definitely they're helpful, and they can be sort of aligned in and dovetailed into the broader objectives. What I would suggest to do, though, as well, is there's sort of a burgeoning donor community looking at donor alignment on investment in digital health. There was just a meeting that was tied to the Global Health meeting in Berlin a couple of weeks ago. I'd really encourage you to be involved with that group, because they debate a lot of these issues in terms of where each country or agency can sort of focus their funding on and their activities on. So, and I can send you the information on that afterwards if you like. But yeah, I mean, both sort of, there's the tactical thing of like if there are particular things you need to help your projects, we can definitely work there, but there's also this sort of broader strategic side of working with the broader donor community.
Yeah, I'd second that, lead. Just to follow up on that for a little bit. It's definitely helpful, and we also understand, say, the constraints that funding agencies are dealing with as well.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you need to also show impact of your programs, and that's easy to do if there's also a use case on the ground.
Exactly.
But do engage deeply with, and as part of those programs, you can maybe package up a bit of funding that you set aside for strategic implementation improvements on a platform you're implementing. But do engage with the partners, the platforms you're using, to make sure that this aligns with strategic objective, has a wider use case outside of your immediate projects, and that has longer-term value.
And I'll give a last idea about this topic, that the problem with business model in our sector is that NGOs don't have funds. There's not really a market for things, because they can only have 7% usually about the project money to be spent on things which are not directly operational.
Yeah.
So when you try to help organizations work better through software or through other things, if the donors are not supporting this kind of effort within their projects, it's very hard to be able to have a sustainable business model of this kind. So that's maybe one important thing to say. We believe that on those items, there are tools which can support you, and then you'll be okay to pay an extra amount in each of our grants to support the use of tools on the heart or whatever. That's, I think, an idea which could be useful.
Yes, I'm from CartONG. Speaking about the business model, you mainly refer to this post-Revalder social business model. Is there any kind of new, let's say, emerging business model that would help to better address those new challenges, the ones that you describe in your presentation? Or does that remain the main reference at the moment?
You mean Osterwalder because of the business canvas?
Yeah, because you were mentioning that you are using this business model. But is there any new kind of canvas? This is not the only one, first of all. And, but according to, from your perspective, do we need something? A new, some new references.
The canvas is not a business model for me. So
No,
it's just a tool, a way to frame it.
I know that.
Yeah. So and you know that. And so for me, it's not a limitation. I don't perceive it because we use it, for example, during the retreat with the HIF to really think about potential business model in the environment sector. It has been a useful tool for that, and I don't feel it as a constraint. That's my perspective. But you need to, of course, have a theory of change and also full inside of it. That's how we look at that.
On the DHIS2 side, and I think this is going to hold for most digital health products in the future, the biggest challenge I found, I work a lot with ministries of health in countries. I've been in countries where there's more than 80 million people population, and there are like 2 people or maybe 1 person in the Ministry of Health who is the IT person, right? Like, how is that possible in 2018 that we don't have capacity in a Ministry of Health? And the GIS department often is the same thing, okay?
Even more so.
The one guy who has the really big printer, you know? That's not funny, actually. I mean, the change that has happened through this World Health Assembly resolution, which a lot of us were part of helping to craft, has actually been to raise the awareness that to conduct yourself towards universal health coverage, to aspire to the SDGs, the utilization of software, the utilization of technology has actually become a fundamental thing that has to be part of the investment strategy and part of the purview of work, at least in ministries of health. That will manifestly affect the business model of how things move forward, because all of a sudden we raise the bar of the relevancy of this in terms of spending across all the other vertical health programs and things that you can imagine a government spends on. It actually hasn't been there up until now, that the leading agencies have sort of guided ministries of health. And you know, nation states, they do their own thing, but I've been in a lot of meetings where the governments kind of say, well, WHO, tell us what to do. You know, WHO is like, we don't have any IT people, I don't know what to do. Can you know, and then nothing has happened. So I think we've reached the point though where we have an amazing opportunity and a change has happened there, and I foresee things happening against that in the future. I'm very hopeful.
To complete back on your questions, what Olivier was saying, I think like all these tools like business model, theory, etc., it's just a way of capturing like the organic innovation of our different projects, and then showing it in a way that is understandable for our traditional retailers, organizations like this. So it's probably a bit constraining on this side, but it's also a great way to like think through. And I would actually ask myself a question to you guys, because one of the important things you mentioned, Olivier, was this aspect of value proposition. Yeah. And you didn't manage to show it like to the partners, to the NGOs, that it was like critical, basically. And when you look from outside, like health information system is critical, but project management tool is also critical, like it's similar. So maybe what would be like the differentiating things that you managed to do, Steven, to make your tool critical?
I didn't do it, nor did the people in the network did it. We were lucky in that ministries of health have you know, for the last 20 years been asked more and more to report more and more different kinds of data sets organized in weirdly different ways to all the donors that give them money. I mean, this is sort of this burden in the international development world that we're all aware of to some extent. And it was actually the people in the countries that sort of demanded back to the donors to say, well, here's a platform that has gotten just good enough for us to actually align ourselves and report it. Please fund this. Please help us make this work. So in many ways, we got to the level where you know, it's sort of the ideal thing. The customer is really driving the requirements for it. And it's about this learning process and being responsive to the customer and the methodology by which we innovate and improve on that I think we will sustain. It's also become a very open platform right now, which means that if you want to innovate on it, like I'd love to have a project management module in DHS too. I think that would be fantastic. You know, you can use the platform now to introduce new ideas, and it's no longer the burden of, oh, we need to build a new product to solve something. It's more we can add something onto something that we already trust. So it's building that network of trust and then building tools within that network of trust that it really makes a big difference. Tools like QGIS and others are the same. I mean, they work the same success model, I think.
To reply to your question, it's not a question about selling the value proposition. I think we were quite good sellers, and we managed to get people interested in our stuff. It's just that the product was not, as you say, critical enough for that. And I think one of the key reasons is because we didn't have a safe sandbox to iterate at the beginning. We had a chance of a first public grant, wonderful. We developed a pilot, great. Oh, we made a mistake. And then 2 years without any funding. And then the funding, but without enough co-funding to be able to invest correctly. So we always been, we didn't have enough fund to try. One of the possible reasons that because you've got a university behind the EShift, yes. So it has been able to have a safe environment to try and to update. Yes. And then we come again to the question that we had from the room, so what do the donors do to have to give a better environment for innovation? So if you, for example, you are paying users to say you have to use software to work better, then it could be a way for us to have an environment to try things. Because we have just for 10 years just been chasing funds, that's one thing. And we just have little grants by little grants, little money to try to move, but you cannot make investment, you cannot plan, it's very hard.
It's true that, sorry, I'm talking because I forgot to say something at the beginning. We were supposed to have Uithol also presenting for Kobo and Nikhil Badan. He couldn't make it for personal reasons, unfortunately, but just to add on what you said, like Kobo was built at a university too. Yeah. And so there is probably something critical to have either university level or community level, like what is doing to also.
Some innovations are easier than others. That harkens back a bit to the previous presentation. I mean, we were sort of lucky to have, say, an innovation in that sense that attracted a large community right away and got started more in, say, a snowball fashion through an open source community. But others need more upfront investment where there may be the business case, but you know, there's not, there's different modalities of going about it.
So I've just been told that the next session will restart in 20 minutes. So it's now up to you to know if you want to take a coffee or directly continue to do something that you can.
We're here for questions.
There's a movement which shows that.
We get through the
I have a last copy of the article about the experience of Sigma for those of you who are interested. And the last t-shirt as well. Ils sont collecteurs.